So, welcome everyone to the Let's Talk series. Today, I have the honor and the pleasure to be joined by Helen Claus-Willemsen and Stephanie Baumgarten-Kustner, both based in the Netherlands and who have decades of experience on working with international families. Helen has 30 years of teaching experience and specializes in assisting international families in securing inclusive school placements for children and with additional needs. Her approach at Inclusion for All is to include one, benefit all. She emphasizes individualized support over labels, fostering understanding and support in classrooms to benefit all students. And Stephanie is a clinical psychologist with a strong international background. She combines her expertise from clinical practice and education to support children and adolescents. With experience in the Dutch special education system and international schools, she now leads her own practice called Baumgarten Child Psychology and More to offer tailored care for international youth. Now, when our children need some help, extra help, parents are in a very challenging position. As parents, we sometimes don't see what is going on with our child. We are way too close. And usually we fear about the unknown. What is going to happen? What steps are necessary? When? Who should we contact? And how long is it going to take? And when this happens whilst we are living abroad, the fear of not getting the help we all need is even bigger. I've seen many families struggle considerably when trying to gather information about the possible next steps to take. And this is why I'm very glad to shed some light on what to expect and how to navigate actually such situations with Helen and Stephanie. Hence the title of today's episode, When Our Multilingual Children Need Special Educational Support Whilst Living Abroad. So let's dive in immediately. And I would like to ask you, let's first explain actually what the special educational needs are. What do we have to understand with this term? Maybe Stephanie, can you start?
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's a really broad term here, special needs. It can mean a lot of things. So we start off with things such as learning difficulties or disabilities, but basically any barrier that can affect a child's ability to access and succeed in a standard educational system. So again, this can be physical disabilities, and I'm sorry if I'm using an incorrect term. I'm a little old when it comes to terms. Sensory impairments, intellectual challenges, emotional or behavioral problems, or very specific learning disabilities. What you see is in some countries, this is very, very defined and protected by law, such as in the UK, you've got Section 20 of the Children and Families Act of 2014. 2014 seems to be a big year for this, because when I look at other countries, it's similar. In the United States, you have the Equality, or actually, I think that's also the UK, the Equality Act of 2010. In the USA, you have the American Disabilities Act. And here in the Netherlands, and again, this is 2014, we have what's called passend onderwijs, or very, in my opinion, poorly translated inclusive education. Actually, technically is fitting education, not inclusive, fitting. And in the Netherlands, this means that all children should have a place in a school that suits their qualities and their abilities. And the idea here is that every educational situation should get the best out of the child. And then there's a whole list beyond that of how schools can go about doing that. But basically, I think that's kind of, I hope, an answer to your question. Yeah.
It is an answer, absolutely. Thank you very much also for referring to these acts in the US, UK, and the Netherlands, also how it is called. Helen, would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's great to be here and to talk to you this morning. One of the things I'd just like to point out is that the terminology changes through the years and in different cultures. And one of the things that you might encounter when you move abroad is that the terminology that is being used in the country that you move to, you may find shocking or upsetting even. Words like handicap, disability, may be words that in your culture are not used anymore, or maybe they are words that are used, and then when you go to a new country, then there are different terms that are used. So that's just something to be aware of. In Britain, we have moved away from special educational needs. We most often talk about additional educational needs. And for me, the definition really is that the child is not fitting into the education system that's offered. And often we see that it's the child that's viewed as the problem rather than the educational system. And inclusive education is about changing that round. But that's a completely different topic for another day, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think the most important aspect here that you mentioned both, and Helen, like just a few seconds ago, is that the definitions can change considerably across cultures and languages, and that the perspective very often is there is a lack in the child, right? So that is something that is not fitting the general expectations for the child in that age group or in that setting, which I find very, very disheartening as a parent, right? When you get in that situation and all of a sudden your little bundle of joy becomes a problem. That is something that is very much affecting. Yes, a problem. Yes, please. We have to put these one. But that is the first step many parents struggle with considerably. Yeah, because we don't want our children to be any kind of, and they are not. Shall we go to the second question? So what are actually, yeah, you wanted to add something?
No, I was just going to say Helen is absolutely correct when you think about people coming from another country and the terminology. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I know for myself as a professional, when I first started working, and I was used to the Dutch system, and I hope I don't offend any Dutchies here. Dutch are very straightforward. They don't beat around the bush. They can, yeah, very straightforward. And then I was working with people that were from the UK, and they were using terminology, and I was embarrassed to admit I had no idea what they were talking about. And I thought, how can I'm the psychologist here, I should know these words. But there really was a whole different terminology for talking about what we were talking about, and I needed to step back and actually learn those words before I could participate in the conversation. So it's a really important thing to learn what the terminology is. Yeah, great for bringing that up. Sorry. Go ahead. I know you wanted to go on to the next one. Sorry about that.
No, but you emphasize something that I think is also very, very important for practitioners around the world, because we have several, we are going to talk about this later probably, but when you are a practitioner and you move to another country, or you are a parent and you find a practitioner from another country, there are not necessarily overlappings or the same terms used in the other countries as well. So you cannot necessarily translate one-to-one the concept, or you should almost make a study on yourself. And that's another part that many parents have to realize, that you need to spend time in digging a little bit deeper in the terminology, in the kind of help and things that we can do as parents. But yeah, let's go maybe to the next question that I had in mind. So what are actually early signs, for however we want to call them, now we have so many different terms, that parents should be aware of? Who would like to start?
You want to take that one, Helen?
So I think one of the first things to do is, if you as a parent feel uncomfortable or worried about your child, that's the first thing that you should take note of, and go and talk to other parents. I have a coffee morning, for example. There are local municipality coffee mornings here as well for parents. Go to an informal situation, have a look at some of the other children, talk to some other parents. And so that's the first thing, is if you're worried, do something about it. Don't sit with a long worry. Now, most countries have tables which say these are the milestones and you should be reaching it by this age. It can be milestones about language, about growth, about movement, and many children go to checks along the way from through the public health systems in particularly in European countries, and they may say to you, "Oh, your child's a little bit low on the milestones," or "Oh, your child doesn't have very much language at the moment," or "Oh, your child is rather short and not growing very well, maybe." And one of the things to do is also to try and find out in your home country also whether that's also true in your home country. I have a friend who is Scottish, and she had a tall husband here in the Netherlands. The Netherlands people are generally above average in their length, and she was continually being told that her children were small. And there actually wasn't anything wrong when she compared them to the milestones in the country that she came from and compared with herself as a mother who was a short mother. And I hear this a lot about multilingual children is, oh, well, they've only got 30 words in the language of the country they're being assessed in, and they should have 100 by now. But actually, if the child has 3 languages and has 30 in each, or has 20, 50 and 30, that's also absolutely fine. So it is about, if you're worried, take note. If somebody, a professional, tells you there could be a worry, take note, but also just think about the wider context.
Mhm. Yes, so be
To start.
aware of, yeah, exactly. No, so it's actually trust a little bit your gut as a parent. If you see there is something going on, or someone is telling you that there is something off, and get information in informal setting. I like this that you say that before going maybe any further, because the experience of others can be very helpful in these situations
Yeah.
before taking the next step. Absolutely. Stephanie, would you like to add something?
I'm glad that you said Helen, the idea of following your gut. I actually, when I went through these questions, I wrote in Dutch an onderbuikgevoel. And I think in all of our languages, we have this reference to something within our abdomen that tells us, I feel it in my waters, or ik voel het in mijn lever. There's always something that tells you in your stomach that something it's not quite right. And I absolutely agree with you 100%. Parents really have to pay attention to that, even if their heart is getting a little bit in the way of accessing that feeling, because of course, as parents, we're the big lions or lionessa to protect our children, and we want everything to be perfect. As a psychologist, I look at what we call the 3 environments. So we look at the home environment, the school environment, and outside of school in free time. And you look to see if things are going okay there. So at home, is the child sleeping? Is the child eating? Are we having lots of tummy aches and headaches? Tummy aches and headaches with young children are, to me, very important. Are they getting on at school? Do they have friends? Do they like the teacher? Do they like going? And are they doing things outside of school? And that doesn't mean they have to do every single activity, but do they have something that they enjoy doing other than school and other than being at home? And if one of those areas isn't so good, to try and look at it very critically and see, do they need help? Do they need more? And that's usually, to me, a sign. But sleeping and eating with little ones and tummy aches, yeah.
Are very clear signs, and maybe also some changes in behavior, right? The child that usually is very outgoing and very happy all of a sudden becomes more silent also in other settings. And
Yeah.
then
And when this happens, I mean, if it's happening just after you've relocated to another country, give the kid a little bit of time. They have to readjust too. But if it's continuing and it's not changing, and the teacher is saying something, or at the daycare they say something, these things add up, and that's usually a time to try and get some help.
Yes, and may I ask, because this is a question that I get asked from parents very often, what is the time that we can wait when we are in transition, we just moved to a place, or the child started a new school? How long should I wait before taking action? If I see that there is something, my child is going through these different things, maybe eats less, sleeps a little bit less good, or has some of these signs, how long should I wait? Should I wait a month, 6 months, a year?
Good question. Really good question. And I wish that there was a one size fits all answer to it. You know, if a family's made a lot of moves, they have a pretty good idea of how long it takes their children to, or this particular child, to readjust to the new situation. If this is the only time they've made a move, that they have nothing to go back on. I would try and put it on yourself as well. How long does it take the parent to adjust? When does the parent start to feel a little bit more comfortable? And what is the parent comfortable with? Are you comfortable with your child waking up every night for 6 months crying? Or you're going to give them a month, and if they're still doing it after a month, and what are you doing already to improve it? I mean, is the family saying, okay, we just moved, it's a difficult time, we're going to pull everybody in and give each kid a lot of extra attention? Or are they so busy with work and the move and everything that they have no time for attention for the kid? So maybe having someone else help out would be more helpful. It really depends. I'm sorry, there's no one size fits all. What do you think, Helen? What would your answer be?
Well, I think if a child regresses in their development, that's always something to be looking out for, whether that's a young child, a 3-year-old, or whether it's a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old. So if they were doing well in the previous situation and then they start to regress and are unable to do the things that they were doing before, I think that that's a real warning sign. I like to work in sort of 6-week blocks, I suppose, because I come from education and we have 10 to 12-week terms, and 6 weeks, it's like halfway through. So to give a child 6 weeks and then see how they are. Are they moving out of the phase that they are in? Was it the trauma of the move? And if they're making progress and moving forward, okay, then maybe we give another 6 weeks and then we evaluate again. If they're not moving forward, or there is no change, or they're regressing further, then I wouldn't wait longer than 6 weeks before going to talk to someone. And that could be your family doctor. It could be somebody even in your family, like a grandparent who has a lot of experience, and say, well, what do you think? What do you notice? It could be your child's school teacher. It could be the mentor at school who spends more time with the child. Um, and it could be the public health services, or a counsellor, a psychologist. So I would sort of work in 6-week blocks. And if you see a child moving forward, then perhaps continue and then reevaluate. And if they're not, then take some help. But I don't think we should underestimate the trauma of relocating for children. They leave behind their family, maybe they may leave behind friends. That may impact their motivation to make new friends, with the idea that they're going to leave them again. And for some children, this trauma goes quite deep, and having someone to express that with through play therapy or art therapy or coaching can be really helpful and help them over the hurdle, so that they don't get stuck into a pattern of feeling about themselves, or about the country they're living in.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one very important thing I would like to emphasize for many families, as you always move as a core family, right? And you depend on each other, and you try to figure out everything in the core family. And sometimes we parents or the siblings are just not the right person to help this child or the person that is struggling. So that is, for me, it was a very, very important insight when I observed others. I said, well, maybe the mom is not the right person to help the child. That's very difficult to understand and also to accept as a parent, that the parent is not the right person in that moment of time in the development of the child to help the child, or that the sibling is not the right person in that given moment. But then it's very important to know where to find this help and where to get that support, right? Yes, absolutely. Helen, did you want to add something else, or Stephanie? Let me know.
No, this
No?
is, I think it's really good information. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Then I would move to the next question. That is actually the early intervention, because what we often get told, or what we can learn, is that early intervention is key. So the earlier, the better, the more time very often we have to help children. And I would add another aspect here. So what if then this extra support and this intervention only happens in the new language, or in a language that the child is not that fluent in yet? What are your suggestions, or what is your experience with families in that situation?
I think Helen and I have
It,
different perspectives, because Helen has much more the school perspective, and I have much more
The family.
the family psychology perspective.
Yeah.
So, do you want to do the school perspective and helping in
oh, go
that,
ahead.
Eric?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. What I'd say for when you're talking about dealing with the trauma, or the more psychology or home support that you would be getting, of course, people want to do this in their mother tongue. You can express yourself better. It has more feeling. But that's not always an option. I mean, some people will opt for doing it online, and with older kids, that's an option. With younger kids, I haven't had a lot of, shall we say, positive experience with trying to do therapy with young children online. It's really difficult. I'd almost rather do something in person without language, like you were talking about, more in terms of play therapy. And also, you have to think about, is the family going to be staying in this new language country, or language in general, for a longer period of time? So are they coming and moving into an international school that's English speaking, and they plan on doing the rest of the education in English, in which case communication becomes the first goal, so that the child can communicate well in that language. But yeah, sometimes you got to work with what you've got. I personally love play therapy, and I'm quite happy to sit and play with Legos with kids, and you get all sorts of stuff coming out, and you really don't need to use a lot of language to access the trauma. So yeah, mother tongue if you can. And also, some of these kids don't have a mother tongue yet. They've got like 3 mother tongues.
Yeah.
So you do your best with what you've got. But it's a
Yes.
very different situation when you're talking about school and education. And for example, getting language support at school, in the school language, when that's not your mother tongue. And that I will hand over to Helen, because she knows more about that.
I think the first thing that I would say is look around again in the community and see who may be able to help you. I'm often involved in going to meetings with parents at Dutch schools, where the parents don't really speak Dutch, and where the meetings become quite pressured. The language is fast. There's a different terminology being used about the child's development. There are different tests which the parents have no experience of, maybe from their country. So if you can take someone with you who does speak the language, who can listen in for you, somebody who you can also debrief with afterwards and say, well, what did they mean about that? And if someone in the meeting can say for you, look, we need a bit of time to digest this. Can we come back with some questions? I would always try and take someone with you if you can, whether it's a neighbor or a friend, maybe it's somebody that you work with, but that can be really helpful initially if your command of the community language is not great. In terms of assessing children's needs in the community language, when it's not their first language, I think we really have to be cautious about that. A wise psychologist that I worked with for a long time said, we really don't want to be doing standardized testing for 2 years. We really want the child to have a good command of the language. But that doesn't mean to say we don't do anything for 2 years. It means that we look at, what does the child need? What can we provide? Are there things you could provide in your mother tongue as well? For example, children who are not learning to read, and there's questions about dyslexia, you can be reading to your child in one of their preferred languages, home language, dominant language. You can be providing audio books so that the child's still getting the vocabulary and is still seeing the text. So there are things that you can do in the language that you use with your child, which will support their development in the new community language. Here in the Netherlands, they are quite quick to make decisions about children's progress in the new Dutch language when they go to the newcomers class. They expect them to be fluent within 1 year, 2 years at the most. We know that children can take 6 years to be academically fluent. So sometimes you also have to try and put a brake on and say, hey, what can I do to support my child? Can we give them a bit more time? But it's trying to collect information from different sources, I think, and listen to the schools. If your child is at an international school, then they have loads of experience about children moving from country to country and multilingual children. They will certainly have some advice. But if you're in a community, you may be in a school that has very little experience of multilingualism or children transferring from other countries. If you're in a village school somewhere, they may have little experience, and then try and find some advice online like Uta. Some people come to me or Stephanie, even online, for a consultancy to say, hey, how would you do this? And we may have some ideas in a specific situation.
Yes, absolutely. Would you like to add something, Stephanie?
Only that it's important, like I said, of course you'd prefer to have support in your own language, but it's important to manage your expectations of where you are and what's available there.
Yeah.
I mean, of course you have to be critical as to when someone can assess or do things in terms of standardized testing or even psychodiagnostic testing. But this is a picture of that child at this moment in time. And this is why, particularly, at least in the Netherlands, when we do assessment with children, it's only valid for 2 years. And it's only valid for 2 years because children change and develop. So even if I prefer to not use a verbal IQ test with the kid, but if they haven't had, in my opinion, enough language, and I'm in the community language, and I go for more than 2 years, I would want to have a good 3 years of education. But even then, I know that their verbal skills are going to be lower. And so you have to look at that subscale and that index scale in terms of this might change. The other one's unlikely, but this one might change simply because of the amount of language. And that's why it's important to have somebody who understands how these tests work together and can interpret them. And as soon as somebody says, you need to take this with a grain of salt, child has 4 languages and has only had education in English for 3 years, I'm like, okay, that's already a good start, because at least they're saying it and at least they're being clear about it. But yeah, I think parents also need to manage their expectations of what they'll be able to access in the country, what's available.
And another fear I heard from parents is also always, whatever the level of language the child has at that given moment, is that they will be disadvantaged in the therapy or in the whole process if they do not speak or they are not so proficient in the language of the therapy yet. So that is something. Now we're not talking about the very young ones. It's maybe, let's say, 8 to 12-year-olds. This is just the people I have in mind at the moment when putting it out there. What would you say about that when parents say, what are the disadvantages? Should I look for help in my country of origin or the country where the stronger language is spoken? Or what would you do in that situation if you had a parent who...
First of all, you look at what the kid is comfortable with or what the child is comfortable with, because the parents may not be comfortable with the child not being able to express everything, but is the child comfortable? Are they willing to give it a try? Because there's lots of different things that you can use. I know I work with cards quite a bit that have pictures on them. for children that don't, and older children, even teenagers and young adults, because they're like, I don't know the word for it. And even teenagers where they're monolinguistic will also say, I don't have the word for it. That's part of being a teenager, a part of growing up. They don't know a lot of these words. So using different instruments to try and help the child access the words for the feelings is really, really important. And does the child prefer to do it in one language over another? Sometimes it's easier to talk about things that are painful not in your mother tongue, because when you talk about it in your mother tongue, it's more painful.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's also distancing yourself from your problems, but if that's a good way as a first access, it's not so bad.
No, it's not so bad. And I think you're emphasizing something very important here, especially for traumatized children, or if there is any kind of trauma. We don't have to get into the details, but if then an additional language is used, this filter that exists can be helpful to approach the first steps, and then maybe in the second, third, or fourth step, they can then be approached also in their stronger or more dominant language. I would like to share a little comment from Franklin Cardenas, who is following us from LinkedIn. He says, thanks for your information. And he also is saying, is the system in the Netherlands supporting the kids maybe a good example that it should be implemented in other EU countries? I'm missing this kind of support in Germany. Do you know anything about that? Thank you very much, Franklin, for your comment and question. Who would like to?
The Netherlands has a very complex, they've spent a lot of time in the last few years creating a very complex way of supporting children. I still think it's very much focused on the standard monolinguistic Dutch child. That would be my opinion, but at least it's there. I don't know. I have a lot to say about passend onderwijs. That's or the Dutch inclusive education, and I'm trying to be polite. Helen, maybe you're better at this.
There are, I think, two different things here. One is that the newcomers' support for families moving into the country, wanting to go into the Dutch education system and learning Dutch, that's really seen a lot of improvement, a lot of resources going into that. That's actually not paid for by the education system in the Netherlands at all. It's paid for by the municipalities. But that is generally pretty well organized. There are some waiting lists, but they're trying hard to move those children through those fast. And that system is there for children from 6 years old through to 16, 17 years old. So that is well organized. In terms of support for the children with additional needs, then I have lots of difficulties. Otherwise, I would have no clientele if it was all perfect. And the fact that I'm very busy means that the support is not always as good. It looks very well organized from the outside, but it's very much based on a deficit model of children having labels, something wrong with them, and what do we do in order to make them fit the system. And it's not inclusive at all, but there is a plan from the Ministry of Education to move to inclusive education by 2035. And so there are lots of changes happening and lots planned for the next 10 years. So let's hope we're in a better place in 10 years' time than Stephanie's 2014 in the last 10 years.
Yes, there is hope, and I'm happy that they are moving towards a more inclusive, if I may use this word, solution. But sometimes it's really nice to know that maybe in a few years we don't have so much work, because that means that the families are getting the help. Which sometimes people tell me, but why would you be happy? Because I'm happy for the children and for the families, actually.
Absolutely.
So,
And Helen
yeah.
and I have to, and you too, we have to retire at some time.
Yeah.
So if they can do it in the
That's
next 10 years, that would make me
I'm
feel
fine.
quite happy about that.
Me too. Yes. So I would like to move on to something else. So when our children now are diagnosed with needing special support or whatever additional support, if we don't want to use the word special, there is a difference whether they receive it before starting school or after starting school. And then some schools will also be not able actually to support them and turn the applications down. another thing that I would like to highlight in this next question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the information that parents should gather before relocating? So if this change happens between different countries, what should parents be thinking of before relocating? Maybe you can start, Helen, with answering this question.
So if your child has a diagnosis, then a medical diagnosis, whether that's dyslexia or ADHD or autism or one of those labels, for me, it's really important that you have the professionals that are working with your child in the country that you're in before you relocate, that you ask them to write a report or write a statement about what the child is capable of doing at that point and what the child's goals are. Because when a child relocates, then their progress may stop. People may not understand. The language might be a real barrier. And so having information for how the child was doing before the family relocated, I think is really important. So collect those speech therapy reports, the psycho-diagnostic reports, get a letter from your doctor if the child is taking medication about the dosage and when they started it, when maybe they need a review, and collect those documents together. And I usually say to parents, if you can get new assessments before you come, if the assessments are 2 years old or more, then that's actually helpful, because then the child is still settled. When the child comes here, then you need to wait a period of time before any assessments, and that could hold up being placed or getting the support that your child needs. So collect those documents together, make a file. Some of my clients put those into something like a Google Drive that they can then share those documents with people, which makes it easier than making lots of paper copies, but it depends where you are in the world whether that's a possibility or not. If you can get them translated into either the community language or into English, most of the people that I've worked with English, when they were going out of the Netherlands somewhere else, English is also acceptable for most people. But if you have electronic copies, then Google Translate can do a reasonable job these days, and other AI translators can do a reasonable job, so that new professionals can access those documents. In terms of what you do when you relocate and you approach new schools, mostly the local system has a way of looking at whether the mainstream is an appropriate placement for your child, and if not, what is the process for moving to special education or getting additional support. Certainly in the Netherlands, what families need to do is just turn up on the doorstep of their local Dutch school with a letter saying, we would like to register our child at your school, and then they're legally obliged to follow through on that. So if it's a local school, go to your local school. They will know how to work in the system. In the international schools, we see quite a lot of discrimination. So the schools will read the files, read the documentation, and may not even see the child before they say no, they won't take the child. I would say always get a statement in writing from the school why they are turning your child down. Wherever possible, try even and get an online appointment so they can also see the child. But if you can get the reasons why they're turning down, then you can also either appeal. There may be an appeals process within the school to do that. But you can also see, well, maybe this isn't such a good fit for my child after all. If the school cannot provide the support that the child needs, you don't want to put the child into an unsupported place where they are really set up to fail. It's really hard to be turned down from international schools. I am currently working with clients who've had 2 or 3 or 4 rejections from international schools. It's an extremely hard process to go through. But if you don't share reports and you're not honest about what your child needs, then you could be setting them up for failure if they are accepted and then things are discovered later that the school can't meet needs. Get a consultant maybe for the area that you're moving to, who knows the schools well and who knows where the provision is good. Wherever possible, if you can visit if you're relocating for a business and for work, and they allow a visit beforehand, go and visit, get the feeling of the schools as well. Do you think your child would be comfortable here before you even apply, so that you're not setting yourself up for applying to completely inappropriate settings? But it is a very hard and painful process for parents to go through.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Stephanie, would you like to add something
Yeah, I would
to
add
it?
to that if you're in the process of doing this, as much as you want to share things with your kids and you want to do this together as a family, I would really recommend that you take on the attitude of being the protective bear and protect your children. Because if it's hurtful to the parents, can you imagine what it is for a child?
Yeah.
Why don't they want me? What don't they want about me? So please, I've seen parents discuss this with their kids and then come to me because the child has anxiety. Really? Really? Um, and I know kids pick up on things, but try really hard to have the adult conversations in the adult places and the kid conversations. We're going to find a school for you. That might take a little while, but it will be a good school, and we're not going to send you to school unless it's a good school. Also, I would add to it, know the law in the country that you're going to,
Yeah.
what your rights are. You do need to be honest. I agree 100% with that. If you try and push your kid into a school without telling them the needs that your child has, the only one who's going to suffer is your child. And remember that that's who's going to suffer is your kid, because you're not going to go to school with your kid. Your kid's going to go there alone in a new place where they don't know anybody, and they're going to be walking on eggshells. Please don't do that to your children. I'd rather see them stay at home for a little bit and then end up at a better school. Again, and know there's educational advisors. There's here in the Netherlands, you have the onderwijsadvies. And yeah, it might require you as a parent to rethink what you wanted and what you'd hoped for and go for the best solution, but manage your expectations and protect your children. Yeah.
That's very so dense and very important information that you just shared, both of you, for this question. And especially if then for the family, for the situation they are in, they do not find a school that meets or can help the child like the child needs to be helped with, or the family as well. Some start homeschooling the children, but this is not something that is allowed in every country. So this is also something that parents should be very much aware of, that it's not a possibility around the world in every country. So what are now alternative solutions to this? For these families, if they don't want or cannot, for example, relocate. This is something that I have witnessed too many times, that the family split. One parent moves to a country where they get the help for that one child, and the rest of the family stays in that country because they had to move there for work, and it's not possible otherwise. And the rest of the family, the other children with the other parents, stay in that new country. That is not really a solution that can be done by every family, and it's certainly not something that we wish for. So what can be alternative solution for these families? Stephanie, maybe you can start, and then I ask Helen.
I don't know if I have a good answer to this. I
Okay.
actually really remember a psychologist here in The Hague who had contacted me years ago asking a similar question. And the father was working for a company all the way in the east of Holland, almost on the German border. And the child really needed to go to a special needs school in English. And the psychologist was asking me the same question. And I said, well, I would have the family live in The Hague. The kid could go. We have a special needs school in English, the Lighthouse. The kid can go to the Lighthouse. And dad takes the train. I couldn't think of anything else. But then you also get to the situation, it's only primary. So what do they do when they come to secondary? It's a real problem. I don't know that I have a good answer to that. Maybe Helen does. I don't. I'm sorry.
Well, no, there are no easy solutions. Certainly, homeschooling can be permitted in some places where there isn't a suitable school for the child, but homeschooling can be very demanding. Not all families and parents can do homeschooling, even if they wanted to. If you are going to go down that route, then again, look around locally for homeschooling groups, because there are homeschooling groups that support parents, or where parents get together so that children can do social activities together. As an educator who spent all my life in schools, I'm not a great fan of homeschooling, but I do know that sometimes there just aren't other options. The other thing you can do is sometimes there are alternative schooling options. It could be that there's a private school that offers a smaller setting. In South Africa, there are many private schools that offer smaller settings with specialized therapies, which might be something that you could do for a year or for 2 years to give your child a real boost and give them some social intervention. So you could look at those if you can afford them. It may be, if you're relocating with a company, that they don't really pay for education, but they may have a clause which is about equal opportunities, which means that they may have a sum of money which they can release through human resources to meet the needs of someone who is formally labelled disabled in some way. For example, the UN has a special budget for all its employees that can be accessed if the child has a diagnosis. So you might want to ask, if you're working with a big company, whether there's some room in HR to support you. There are some companies with exceptions, that you go through an exception committee where you wouldn't normally get an educational grant, but where there is the option if your child cannot get education in another way. And in some countries, like the Netherlands, we have the democratic schools, which are outside of the system and which offer a very unique educational opportunity. And children who've not been successful in mainstream education or special education may fit into the democratic school system, where there's a lot more choice about what the child studies and how they study and which subjects they study. So it might be worth looking around and seeing if there are alternatives in the country that you're in, which may be a little bit off the beaten track or might not be your first choice, but they may be a solution for your child if you're temporarily, and by temporary I mean 2 or 3 years, in a country.
Mhm. So do I understand it right that these democratic schools would then be, aren't they in Dutch schools then? In which language would that be?
I think they
Okay,
do
so
both.
They do both.
yeah, in the Netherlands, the Amsterdam Democratic School is bilingual, so you can do both streams. And then the one out towards Soest, Utrecht, they will also take multilingual children. The one in The Hague is less open. It's more Dutch focused, but they have also taken some other children. So certainly within the Netherlands, there are those options. But in other countries, it may just be worth exploring what else is there that's a little bit unusual, but it might just provide a solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Great.
I know of a couple of families where there was some, shall we say, rather severe autism, and they were able to find what we call kind of like a day treatment, where they're actually and they were doing a lot with computers and IT, and the kids were actually coding and doing a lot with that, so that there is education, but not in the formal sense. And this requires, in the Netherlands at least, with sitting down with the leerplichtambtenaar, poorly translated as the truancy officer, to try and see, well, what can we do? We can't do this and we can't do that. So what can we do? And try and think in terms of cans as opposed to the other way around. And like Helen said, quite often this means you probably will have to have a diagnosis, or you will have to do other things to show that you need this type of education. But there are options, but you have to be very open-minded and really look in the corners and underneath things to try and find them.
Yeah, that's
Can I
amazing.
just add, I just suddenly thought the older child, like 16, 17, 18, it's often very difficult to learn a new language. and study and finish your exams for the end of high school. So sometimes the solution there is to follow online schooling. Maybe from the school that the child's currently at may offer that option, but there are recognised schools that offer the US high school diplomas, but also the UK A-levels, international baccalaureate and so on, can be studied online. And it may be that that's a solution that you then look for other social activities and sports activities, but that online learning may be a solution for an older teenager.
Yes, I'm very happy that you mentioned this, Helen, because I have had many children or teenagers opt for this solution at some point. And it has proven, especially after the pandemic, there are so many more options out there, and really high standard that prepare the children amazingly for whatever step they want to take after their A levels or IB or whatever formation they are looking forward to. But as you just mentioned, it's also important for these children then to also have some more social interactions in real life, so that they are mingling with peers. This is something that I just recently said to some parents that were saying, well, my child is constantly on these platforms and studying and learning because he's very, very keen. But there was this other pillar, right, that Stephanie mentioned before that was missing. That's to say the social interaction with peers that they had to provide for separately. Great. Thank you very much. So I would be at the last question for today, but well, there are so many more, but let's just finish with this one. As you are on screen, Helen, what would be your wish to change in the educational system for these international families and for these children especially?
Oh, wow. Well, my practice is not called Inclusion for All for nothing.
Yes.
What I what I would really hope for is that families will find a place where their child is accepted, where their child feels happy, and where their child can progress academically and socially and emotionally at the rate that they need to progress, rather than being pushed into things that the system is saying. I really hope that we can create a world where all children can go to school together, and where that support can be found in the local school. And we're a long way from that, although the European schools, all in their own way, the European countries are moving towards that vision. There are lots and lots of challenges along the way. The last thing perhaps that I would say is to the families is you may not find something which is the same as the country you're coming from. And if you can have the strength, Stephanie mentioned open-minded, but if you can also be open to trying something different, to looking at the options, you may be surprised at what you can find. In my experience, many teachers here are very open and very willing to support children, even if the system doesn't. So if you can find advocates and people to stand next to you in helping you for your search. But my dream is for more inclusive schools where children will never be turned down, but where the question will always be, what can we do to support your child so that they can be successful here in this school?
Yeah, that sounds good. That would be very, very nice if it would be realizable. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Oh, you just said it so beautifully, Helen. Really, it just, I'm sitting here, I don't know if you, with this big grin on my face. I'm like, yeah. Children shouldn't be rejected, because I agree with you 100%. Most of the time, the teachers want to help the kid. There's just not the room within the structure or the system of the school, and that's very frustrating. I know for me, I would really love it if we talk about educational system for internationals, that there's something other than an international baccalaureate, which, excuse me for saying it, idiot thought that all children should be able to do that. They can't. Not all children can do that. The world is a bell-shaped curve. We have very high achievers. We have low achievers and we have average achievers that have lots of baggage. Let's offer different options. Why is there not a vocational option? All of these things, that's what I would really love to see. I hope before I retire, um, that at least in my little microcosm of the world, that here in the Netherlands, at the international schools, at the international level, there's something other than an international baccalaureate or a European baccalaureate. Even worse, you have to do it in multiple languages, for people, for that there are other options, and that they're recognized and that they're meaningful, so that these kids can stand up when they're finished and say, look what I got, and they can be proud of it, and then they can go on to find a job or go to secondary education or whatever it is, but that they can do it with pride. That's what I really hope to see. That would make me very happy.
Mhm. Oh yes, I can only underscore with red, with blue, with all kind of colors, what you both just said, and especially what I, as a parent and as a professional like you, working with families with these kind of situations, is this general thought that only a child that does a baccalaureate, an IB level, A level, whatever, is worth to go ahead and to study, and only university studies are something to be proud of. I would like just to send a little message to these parents. Please, your child is more than worth of everything that is possible. So instead of trying to fit them into these categories or in these systems, try to find the context where they are, what they can do is valued, and where they can thrive.
And celebrate it.
And celebrate, yes, exactly.
I worked at a school that was called, at the time, had Knooppunt. It's now the Open Leercentrum, so an open learning center. And this is for kids within the Dutch educational system that have pretty much been kicked out of every other school. And one year, at the end of the year, we had a graduation. These kids had never been to a graduation. They'd never gotten an award. And it was, whether it was an actual diploma or whatever, they got to walk up to a podium. They got to stand in front of their parents. They got to have a paper given to them, and attention was given to them. We gave out, soda and stuff like that. This is so important for their development and for their well-being, that they can do at whatever level something and recognize it. Yeah.
The recognition and the fact to be seen by what you
Yeah.
can and not what you cannot do is a huge one that I personally really hope for. Great, thank you very much. This hour just passed by in no time. Thank you very much, Stephanie and Helen, for taking the time this morning to share all your knowledge and giving us all these very precious and valuable insights. I think I'm going to write something about this so that also people who couldn't follow us this morning can watch, of course, the recording. So our wish is really to have this inclusion of everyone having a context, a place where they can learn and thrive at their pace, in their way, and be recognized by all the steps they are taking. Yeah, that is something that I so hope that we could emphasize, and I think we emphasized it very well. Thank you very much, both of you. And yes, what I would like to give the parents who are following, or sometimes also some practitioners or professionals, teachers, is don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. We mention it in different contexts, to step out of your comfort zone and to try something new. This new might be the solution for your child and for your whole family. And it might be not what your extended family is expecting or your friends are finding acceptable. You will find other friends. You will find those who are supporting you. I'm talking by experience. So please just stay as parents, be the advocate for your child, and do your utmost best by loving them and finding a way for them to thrive in the best way. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to contact Stephanie or Helen or myself. we are very happy to help. And I am very much aware that we mainly focused on the Netherlands, but I think even understanding one kind of system can give you more ideas wherever you are in the world to figure out what is possible where you are by simply comparing, well, in the Netherlands, they have this. Do we have something similar here? Maybe the answer is no. Maybe the answer is yes. So just try it out. So thank you very much, Stephanie and Helen, for your time this morning. And thank you for everyone who has been following us so far. And for those who are going to watch the recording, let us know in the comments if you would like to continue this conversation. And for now, I just wish you all a very nice rest of the day and week, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Uta. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you.